Today I'm dusting off an old box score, one smudged with cigar smoke, cheap whiskey, and the fingerprints of gamblers who thought they could outsmart the greatest game ever invented. Baseball fans, historians, and lovers of a good story behind the story, welcome back. I'm your host, Brian Smith. And today I'm stepping up to the plate for one of the most infamous tales in American sports. A story of greed, betrayal, and heartbreak that still echoes through baseball history. The tale of the 1919 Chicago White Sox, the best team money didn't buy. The team that should have been legends, but instead became a cautionary tale whispered across generations. This is the story behind the story of the Black Sox Scandal, and at its heart is a single plea from a young boy outside a courthouse.
No! Say it ain't so, Joe. Say it ain't so.
In 1919, the Chicago White Sox were the class of the American League. A powerhouse lineup, 2 star pitchers, and a fan base that believed they were destined for greatness. They were so good, sports writers of the time called them the greatest club ever assembled. But inside the clubhouse, resentment simmered hotter than a July doubleheader. Why? 2 words: Charles Comiskey. To understand how the World Series fix of 1919 happened, you have to meet the man who unintentionally fertilized the soil for corruption. Charles Comiskey, owner of the Chicago White Sox, a former player himself, but somewhere along the line he became, well, cheap. Not frugal, not thrifty, cheap. Legend says he was so tight-fisted he wouldn't pay to have the players' uniforms properly laundered. The White Sox wore dingy, sweat-stained jerseys so often that opposing players and sports writers took to calling the team the Black Sox long before the scandal, not because of corruption, but because Comiskey wouldn't pay to have their uniforms washed. If you're going to have the team name of White Sox, you would better have clean white uniforms. Imagine winning the American League pennant while being embarrassed about wearing dingy uniforms. That's the motivation to revolt right there. And thus, long before the scandal, the nickname Black Sox was already floating around. Comiskey's penny pinching wasn't just about laundry. He promised Eddie Cicotti, star pitcher, workhorse, and one of the best in the game, a $10,000 bonus if he won 30 games. Cicotti won 29. He went to Comiskey and said, "I'm right there. I earned it." Comiskey's response, "29 is not 30, Eddie. No bonus." That's the kind of math that makes a man consider other means to make money. That was the moment Cicotti later said he felt the worm turn, and he wasn't alone. Many players felt underpaid, undervalued, and under Comiskey's thumb. They were champions, but they didn't feel like it. The 1919 White Sox were loaded. Shoeless Joe Jackson, one of the greatest hitters who ever lived. Eddie Cicotti, master of the knuckleball. Lefty Williams, a southpaw ace. Buck Weaver, fiery competitor. Ray Schalk, a brilliant catcher. They won the American League with ease. They were the best club in baseball, and they knew it. But they were also among the lowest paid. Comiskey's frugality wasn't just annoying, it was insulting. Players felt cheated, disrespected, and trapped by the reserve clause that prevented them from seeking better pay elsewhere. Resentment simmered like a pot left on a stove, and gamblers, always sniffing around ballparks like stray cats looking for scraps, smelled opportunity. Enter the underworld. Gamblers approached certain players quietly, carefully, like men offering forbidden fruit. And that stew of resentment walked the gamblers. Baseball in 1919 was crawling with them. Shady characters hanging around ballparks, hotel lobbies, and train stations. And the biggest shark in the water was Arnold Rothstein, a shadowy figure who was the most powerful gambler in America. Rothstein was the mastermind of the criminal underworld, smooth, brilliant, and always 3 innings ahead of everyone else. He denied involvement in the fix, of course, but historians say he made over $350,000 betting on the series, millions in today's money. And Rothstein didn't get rich by accident. Rumors say meetings took place in smoky hotel rooms. Players whispered about money, real money, far more than Comiskey ever paid. But only a select handful were involved, not the whole team, not even most of the team, only a select handful. But that handful was enough. The fixers included Eddie Cicotte, Lefty Williams, Chick Gandil, the ringleader, Swede Risberg, Happy Felch, Fred McMullen. Cicotte was promised $10,000. Others were promised even more. Some were paid up front. Some were not paid at all. Some were threatened, and the gamblers worried the fix would be obvious. Cicotte assured them, "We're good enough to lose without looking like we're losing." Rothstein did not get his hands dirty. He let others do the talking, but everyone knew who was really pulling the strings. Now, I want to slow down for a moment and talk about Shoeless Joe Jackson, the man who was the White Sox greatest hitter, and sure to be future Hall of Famer. Joe got his nickname after playing a mill game in South Carolina without shoes because new ones were giving him blisters. A fan yelled, "You shoeless son of a gun," and the name stuck. Shoeless Joe was one of the many reasons that Chicago was considered the favorites to win the series. Game 1, Cincinnati Reds versus Chicago White Sox. The gamblers needed a signal that the fix was on. Eddie Cicotte agreed to hit the first batter of Game 1. He stepped to the mound. The crowd roared. The gamblers watched from the stands, waiting. First pitch, crack. The ball slammed into the first batter like a gunshot, announcing the crime. The fix was underway. Game 1 was a mess. Errors that would embarrass a little leaguer. Balls dropped. Throws sailed. Swings missed by a mile and looked half-hearted. Cincinnati won Game 1 easily. Fans were stunned. Sports writers raised eyebrows. Christy Mathewson, a Hall of Fame pitcher turned journalist, watched from the press box and wasn't fooled for a second. He knew what a real ball player looked like when he was trying to win, and he knew what he saw wasn't it. Game 2 was another mess, more of the same, and the Reds won again. Fans were confused. Sports writers were suspicious. Christy Mathewson watched again from the press box and reported the suspicions to some of his colleagues. Game 3. Pitcher Dickie Kerr, not part of the fix, took the mound for Game 3. He pitched like a man possessed. Chicago won. It was the first sign that something was off. Why did the Sox look incompetent one day and unbeatable the next? Back to the script in Game 4. Cincinnati won again. And by now, fans were whispering. Writers were suspicious. Something smelled rotten, and it wasn't just because of Comiskey's laundry budget. Then came the gambler's mistake. They didn't pay the players all the money they promised. And suddenly, the conspirators decided, we are done losing. The players revolted and tried to win the series. In 1919, the World Series was a best-of-9 series. The White Sox played hard. They fought back. The gamblers panicked. Warnings were sent. Threats whispered. Pressure applied. The damage was done. The Reds ultimately won the series. The fix was real, and the Black Sox Scandal was born. Baseball was scarred for life. It was a winter of whispers. Rumors spread like wildfire. Ring Lardner wrote columns hinting at corruption. Fans debated in barbershops and saloons. The fix became an open secret. By the next season, the truth could no longer be ignored. In 1920, a grand jury convened. Players testified. Eddie Cicotte confessed. Shoeless Joe Jackson also confessed, though later he said he didn't fully understand what he was signing. And then came the moment that became legend. It is one of those iconic stories behind the story. Joe walked out of the courthouse. A young boy tugged at his sleeve. "Say it ain't so, Joe." Joe didn't answer. He couldn't. Arnold Rothstein, of course, denied everything. Smooth as silk. The jury, they found the players not guilty. The players smiled and posed for pictures. But baseball had a new sheriff, Commissioner Kennesaw Mountain Landis. Landis didn't care about the verdict. He cared about the integrity of baseball. He banned all 8 accused players for life. No appeals. No second chances. No Hall of Fame, and just like that, the greatest team in baseball was gone. Now we come to the heart of our story, Shoeless Joe Jackson. Shoeless Joe was one of the greatest hitters who ever lived, and with maybe the greatest nickname. In fact, Babe Ruth patterned his swing after Joe's. Shoeless Joe is prominent in the movie Field of Dreams. Joe's bat, a dark, heavy piece of lumber, was nicknamed Black Betsy. In the 1919 World Series, the one he was accused of throwing, Joe hit .375 with 12 hits, the most of any player on either team. He committed no errors. To this day, many believe Joe wasn't truly part of the fix, or at least not willingly, but the ban was absolute. And historians agree the conspirators' biggest blunder was losing Game 1 intentionally. Had they won early, the gamblers could have made even more money. The fix would have looked less suspicious. Real baseball men and sharp sports writers saw through the sloppy play immediately. The fix wasn't subtle. It wasn't clever. It was obvious, and it cost 8 men their careers. The White Sox franchise collapsed. It took decades to recover. Shoeless Joe went home to South Carolina. He ran a dry cleaning business, then a bar. One day, Ty Cobb walked in. Joe didn't greet him. Cobb said, "Don't you know me, Joe?" Joe replied softly, "Sure, I know you, Ty. I just didn't think anyone wanted to know me." That line hits harder than a Babe Ruth home run. The Black Sox Scandal nearly destroyed baseball. But then, along came Babe Ruth, blasting home runs into the stratosphere and giving fans something new to cheer for. Commissioner Landis cleaned up the sport. Fans slowly returned. Baseball survived. It healed. But it never forgot. Families of the band players spent decades trying to clear their names. Books were written, documentaries filmed, movies made. 8 Men Out, Shoeless Joe, Field of Dreams. There were countless histories and retrospectives. All retell the tragedy of the Black Sox and the heartbreak of Shoeless Joe. But none of them can fully capture the human cost. The only attractive item I can take from this chapter of baseball history is the 1919 White Sox uniform logo. That beautiful, old-school SOX is one of my favorite baseball logos ever. Clean, bold, iconic, right up there with the Yankee pinstripes. In fact, it's on the cover of this podcast. It's rarely used now because of the scandal, but if I ever see that jersey, you better believe I'm adding it to my collection. So there you have it, the rise, fall, and lingering sorrow of the 1919 Chicago White Sox, a team that should have been remembered for greatness, but instead became a warning, a scandal that began with resentment and ended with exile. And at its center, a quiet man with a hickory bat he named Black Betsy, and a boy who asked the question we're still asking today. Say it ain't so, Joe. Joe Jackson never got his Hall of Fame plaque, but he got something else, immortality. And that's the story behind the story of the Black Sox Scandal. I hope you found it as fascinating as I did.
I did.
My name is Brian Smith, and we are history.